Welcome, everyone. My name is Seth Jones. I am one of the founders and the CEO of Superstratum Labs. We have John Miles on the call here as well. John is the president of the company and the chief science officer and chemist. And if any of you are already customers or buyers, or if you've spoken with someone on our team, you may know John. We're very excited today. We've been doing these webinars and we're going to do them more frequently because what we have found is that many people who are sick or who are struggling with what to do with their home, they really need a lot of information. And so our company will talk a little bit about who we are, what we do, but our goal is to really be able to empower you and to give you that information so that you can come up with the plan and understand what the right thing to do is in your situation. Okay, so here, who we are. We are Superstratum Labs, and we started our company about 4.5 years ago. It started primarily in Los Angeles. Now we're located in Nashville, Tennessee, and our manufacturing fulfillment facilities in North Carolina, outside of the Charlotte area. But we are a passionate team of artists, marketers, scientists, salespeople who've all been personally affected by building-related illness and mold and mycotoxins. And we strive to create solutions that are not just effective as compared to what is out there, but that are also safe. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Okay, so what you'll learn today, our goal is to empower you with the truth about your home and your health. There's a lot of information out there today, and it's hard to know what is true and what to sift through. So we want to give you, that information and also show you real steps you can take to improve your environment. So much of what is out there, it works in theory sometimes, or other times it's incredibly expensive. And a lot of people are just looking to say, okay, I don't have $30,000 for the mold remediation that I was quoted, but I'm sick and I want to get better. So we want to give you practical things that you can do to improve your environment. And then there's no need to take notes on this. We are recording this webinar. It'll be posted on YouTube. And then we will follow up with you guys on ways to take action. So you can tune in and pay attention to us. So why you're here? Most likely you're here because you suspect your home is making you sick, or you may know your home is making you sick. You may be having trouble convincing a loved one that your home is making you sick. This is a very, very common problem that we have. And so that might be why you're here. You may have found mold in your home and want to know what to do. Or a lot of people, you may be dealing with remediation right now in the middle of a situation, or you're worried about your remediation working, or perhaps you've just completed remediation and that remediation did not work. And so you're looking for additional solutions. Right, so we want to talk today, kick it off and talk about the sick home epidemic. So first, what we like to, before you ever go about solving a problem, the first thing you need to do is understanding, why you have the problem. How does a home get sick? So building failure, that is what leads to a sick home. Building science and how you construct homes is a entire college course in and of itself. But what it's important to realize is that we get moisture in buildings because our buildings have problems. Now, some of these problems come because we're retrofitting buildings. Some of these problems come because different building materials fail. And in many cases, what we see, these problems happen because a builder makes a mistake or they cut a corner. So whatever the cause, the building creates moisture accumulation in that. It could happen in the HVAC. It could happen through a leak. It could happen through high humidity in a crawl space. And the modern airtight envelopes of homes today are what trap this moisture and this air inside the homes. Now, depending on, what age you are, you may have grown up in different environments. You may not have had AC in the home or HVAC. And in the past, that was a little bit more difficult. We weren't quite as comfortable, but our homes could breathe more. So air was able to circulate. Energy efficient, airtight homes, the plastic wrap that we put around that home does a great job of keeping that now conditioned air inside of our building. But as you can imagine, when moisture or a leak gets into that home, because it's airtight and that air is not moving, it takes longer for that moisture to evaporate. So it traps the moisture inside. And when moisture gets trapped inside of a building and there's a food source, then you get mold growth because mold spores are everywhere. So mold can grow unseen. It can exist within a home, for many years, in some cases before it's found. And that's fairly widely known, right? We know that mold grows in our homes. We know that mold makes us sick, but there's this new piece of the puzzle that has come into clarity over the last, I would say, 3 to 4 years. And that is that mold, when it's growing, releases a defense mechanism. So mold has a weapon. Primarily, it's actually a biological weapon. It's a poison. And those poisons that mold create are called mycotoxins. And mycotoxins are the real danger within an airtight home, because after mold has been removed, those mycotoxins can still be in that environment. It's like an army that has fought a battle and has laid out landmines, right? Will stick around long after that army is gone. After you've even won the battle with the army, those landmines are still there. So that's how a home gets sick. Now, how many sick homes are there? How common is this problem? Well, right now, the government says that about half of all homes and offices have ongoing water damage issues. So 65 million homes in the US right now are experiencing some type of water damage issue. That's 170 million people just in the US that are living in these compromised environments. And we'll talk a little bit more about this, but about 67 million of those people, it's estimated, have one of a few genetic markers that make them more susceptible to building-related illness, which we're going to talk about. So there are millions and millions and millions and millions of people right now who are suffering from building-related illness as a result of the lived environment. And this problem is not going away. 2.2 million homes every year have their basement flood. And the way we're building homes, like we talked about, we're building them cheaper because things are getting more expensive, and we're making them more airtight. And all of these combinations together means that this problem is getting worse. Okay, so what are mycotoxins? So mycotoxins are the defense mechanism created by mold. They have been extensively studied in food and agriculture. Because of the way that we process food, we store it often, right, in grain silos and things like that. Well, when moisture gets into those environments, mold grows and it creates its poisonous toxin. And this is very widely known. The WHO estimates that about 25% of the world's foodstuffs are actually infected with mycotoxin. And it is because of this that there's been extensive studies done on mycotoxins. And you can do a lot of this research yourself. Just Google, mycotoxins or different ailments, and you will find dozens and dozens and dozens of peer-reviewed scientific studies linking mycotoxins to everything from autism in children to Alzheimer's in the elderly, to widespread autoimmune disease, to mental health issues, to neurological issues, and every place in between. The problem is that we had not known that these toxins existed within the indoor lived environment. We knew that they were in our food, and they're highly, highly regulated in food because they're carcinogenic when ingested. But what we're now learning is that these toxins are actually airborne within our homes. And when you breathe in a mycotoxin, that can go straight into the bloodstream, and it can go straight to the brain through the nasal cavity. So we know what mycotoxins are. We have lots of studies on them. We have lots and lots of studies showing how dangerous they are when they're ingested. And now what we're realizing is that these toxins are airborne, they're in the air, and they're even more dangerous than when they're ingested. Okay, so what are the health effects of mycotoxins? Now, there's a lot of talk right now all over the internet, and there's lots of doctors and lots of people talking about these types of conditions. So I think I would be remiss if I didn't give a little bit more explanation about how mycotoxins work in the body. Now, what you'll see here is all of these things that mycotoxins have been directly linked to. These are things that we see in our clients and our customers on a daily basis. So they're extremely common, but most people think about their health in terms of germ theory, right? We catch a cold, we catch something in our body fights it off, right? And then we get rid of it and it's done. But we're in an environment and we catch it from someone. Mycotoxins and chronic illness actually works differently. Chronic illness is an accumulation of toxins from the environment. And depending on that individual person, their DNA, how much time they spend in the building, what other things they have going on, because it's never just one thing, right? All of those factors contribute to how a person's symptoms express as a result of the toxicity in the environment that they live. So mycotoxins are chemicals, like we've learned, right? When they get into the body wants to get them out. And the body has a mechanism to do that. It does it through the lymphatic system. And when if any of you have worked with functional doctors, there's a lot of detoxing involved. They're trying to activate the lymphatic system and the body's ability to get these toxins out. But that 67 million people that we talked about here in the United States, they have genetic conditions that make it so that their body has a lot of trouble detoxing. They can't, it's called methylation. So that methylation process does not work. So when they stay in these buildings over time, sometimes it can happen very quickly, but certainly over long periods of time, it accumulates. And our toxin bucket gets fuller and fuller and fuller until it overflows, right? If we don't have that hole in the bottom so that they can drain out, then when we're in a sick building, these accumulate in our body and we exhibit some combination of these, right? It's, what we see a lot, the combinations we see a lot would be brain fog, depression, anxiety, bloating, chronic UTIs and yeast infections, autoimmune disease, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, alpha-gal, on and on and on. If it is an autoimmune disease, it is possible for that to be triggered or caused or made worse by mycotoxins. So what I like to tell people is when you're thinking about mycotoxins, what stops a lot of people from really making that connection about what is making them sick is that they think, oh, well, I had that before, or this happened, or this happened, or this happened before. And they can't, again, they're thinking of it in terms of if they were catching a cold. They say, oh, well, I already had the cold. And sure, I'm a little bit sicker when I'm in my house, but that doesn't really make sense that my house made me sick. Well, it's because we need to understand that maybe you did have, let's say you had issues with bloating. Let's say you had candida issues. But when you got into a sick building, well, now there's toxicity in the body and that makes your candida explode. Okay. So this means that you will not be able to get well no matter what your ailment is. If you're living in a sick home, even if that home wasn't the genesis of your disease or your illness, you won't be able to get better if you don't heal that environment. Let's keep going here. Okay, so we know the dangers. Now, where do the problems hide? So there's three main ways that homes get sick. The first is the most common and the most dangerous, and those are HVAC units. So as you may know, the HVAC system of your home is heating and cooling your air, but it's also dehumidifying your air. And that's an important feature to maintain a healthy environment, but dehumidification means that there's moisture involved. And anytime these systems fail, it can lead to leaks, high humidity, and that can lead to mold growth. Now, this is especially problematic when you're talking about HVAC units because these are hidden areas of the home. They're not accessed very often. Many people don't even clean their HVAC unit, and every bit of air that you're breathing in your home is coming through that unit. So when mold is growing on the coils in your unit or within the ductwork, this can become a mycotoxin generator that just spreads mycotoxins across your whole home. And in my personal experience, the most extreme cases that I see from a health perspective, typically start in the HVAC. Moving on, how does mold get into the HVAC? Well, there are other ways that mold can grow in a home. Hidden leaks, the kind of the one we all know of. Oh, we get a leak behind the wall and that water drips for a while and then mold grows, right? Now that can certainly make you sick because those problems can persist for long periods of time. But typically when mold is within a cavity and it's not being disturbed, it can make people sick, especially if you're very sensitive, it can make you sick. But that air is more contained than it would be in an HVAC unit. However, those spores are still making their way out into the home, right? They're coming out through the outlets. They're coming out through those places where a little bit of air circulation does get. And as those spores move through the air currents, they get drawn into the HVAC, and that starts the growth of the mold there. The third place is the crawl space. And I would say this is, in terms of how serious these issues are, the types of problems they can cause, crawl spaces would be, I would say, second, even ahead of hidden leaks sometimes, because 60 to 70% or so of the air that you breathe in your home is coming from your crawl space. And again, crawl spaces oftentimes are hidden. We don't go down there, sometimes for years at a time. Sometimes we know that crawl space is musty or there's mold growing down there, but because it's out of sight, out of mind, we just leave it. But this can be a very, very serious issue in a crawl space. So when you're assessing your home, you're feeling sick, you're saying, okay, could it be my home? These are the 3 areas that you want to check. Okay, so why are mycotoxins so much more difficult to remove than mold? Well, mycotoxins are chemicals, like we learned, so that means that you can't kill them. They don't die, like a mold will. Now, traditional cleaning and disinfectants are good when used as directed to kill things like bacteria, to kill mold spores, but they don't destroy mycotoxins because they're not designed to break the molecular bonds of the toxin. They're designed to disrupt the DNA or destroy physically the living organism, but they leave behind the mycotoxins. Also, standard mold tests don't test for mycotoxins. They only are looking for what mold is there. But molds can make different types of mycotoxins. Sometimes they don't make any mycotoxins. Sometimes they make ochratoxin. Sometimes that fusarium might make trichothecenes, right? So these things are related, but they're different. And you can miss the toxins in the home that's making you sick if you're only testing for mold. Now, mycotoxins are also particularly difficult or dangerous for those who have building-related illnesses, chronic illnesses, these genetic conditions, and general chemical sensitivities. There are cases where we see this all the time, where someone in a home will not feel sick at all, right? But another person in that home, and oftentimes, I would say more often it's the wife, they are extremely sensitive. And when I say extremely sensitive, I mean so sensitive that it seems crazy. And I'll give you a couple of examples of this to illustrate this point. But we had a customer one time who had gotten poisoned in their home. It was a really bad mold issue, and she had to move out, and she carried her dog out of the house. And when she took it, she put the dog into the passenger seat of her car. And from that point on, she couldn't sit in the passenger seat of her car without having a reaction to the mycotoxins. We had another customer, same thing. It was a wife. They had to move out. The husband did better than the wife did. But when the husband would come to visit her, if she would give the wife a hug, she would have, an inflammation reaction. And it got so bad that he even would type on her computer. And if she went behind to type on the computer, she would have a reaction. So the range of sensitivities of these toxins can make them very difficult to identify, and for people who are suffering can make them extremely sensitive, or even sometimes the best mold remediation, it does not get the environment pure enough for that person to re-enter. Okay, so I think I'm gonna tell a couple stories of customers that we've worked with to help kind of spark some ideas and give you some more information. Kristen M, this is a customer that we had. She had pretty severe digestive issues. Eventually, she was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. She had sought some medical treatment and gotten some relief, but her symptoms returned after she got home. And her doctor at the time, had not thought about mold, had certainly not told her to look into the environment. But she was, did her own research and figured that out. She came to us and she got her ductwork clean, and she detoxified her home. And she got better. In fact, she got, within about 36 hours of even leaving the home, all of her colitis symptoms almost went away. So it was really a matter, she was able to realize very quickly that just being in that environment created so much inflammation to the point where she couldn't even eat, because her stomach, was in so much pain when she would be in that environment. So another thing that's important about this customer is that she was a girl. She's a female in her mid-20s, and she was renting. And that's really important too, because so many people feel frozen. They don't know what to do if they don't own the home, or if they don't, if they don't have a lot of money to spend on a solution, or if they're renting a place and their landlord doesn't want to fix the problem. Or this is a great example of someone who really took that into their own hands, and figured out a solution that was affordable for them, and that made a tremendous effect on their health. Brittany Nicole is another one of our customers. She actually her story has gained quite a bit of virality online. And she is, I would say, one of the more extreme cases that you'll find. She had a major mold issue. The large builder, they bought a brand new home, and the builder left the vapor barrier off the home. So within about 3 years, mold had filled up the entire home, but it was invisible. And they were gaslit for, almost 2 years about that. The family got extremely sick. They're still extremely sick. They're suing their builders. They were in a terrible situation. The whole family had to sleep in the living room of the home because every other place of the home just made them so sick. Their contents were contaminated, and they were trapped in that home. They couldn't move out because of the issues with the builders and finances and all that. So Brittany is an example of someone who needs a temporary solution, right? A triage solution. Now, most of the information that you're going to find online about the situation that she's in is going to be all about remediation, right? Fix that home. But Brittany and her family don't need to fix that home. They need to get out of that home. But until they can do that, they need to manage that environment. So we helped create a protocol for Brittany so that she could do some maintenance cleaning to just try and protect herself and her family until they could get into the new home. And they are, happy to say, about to get into a new home. But now what we're going to work on is detoxifying the new home so they know that it's safe to move into, and detoxifying all their belongings as well, so that they can transfer those belongings and they don't get, the reactions that you would typically get. Okay, so how do we heal a sick home? Well, the the traditional method rather, is to fix the water intrusion. So if we have a leak, we need to fix the source of that leak, then remediate that mold. And we're not talking too much about remediation today, but there are a few key things that we need to know. And one of those is mold remediation should always involve physical removal of the source, right? You should never fog or spray into an environment and expect for all of that mold to be killed and removed, because mold can still be damaging to your health when it's dead, because those mycotoxins, they're stuck to the spores as well, and those can still make you sick. So fogging for many people in mold remediation can not just not fix the problem, it can actually make the problem worse in some cases. So we always recommend, when available, when it's possible to do that, is to get that mold out of the building. Now, in a case like Brittany's, where you can't get that mold out of the building, now we have to move in, a little bit more comprehensive protocols to make sure we're not disturbing mold with what we're doing, so that it doesn't create more toxins, right? At that point, now we're trying to manage a relationship with that mold. But when you're trying to win the war against the mold has to be removed. So step 1, fix the water. Step 2, remediate the mold. Step 3, clean the ducts. This is something that many people overlook. It needs to be done about every couple of years. And it's also important to detox those ducts and to use the right products in that process to ensure success on that. But those 3 things: fix the water, remediate the mold, clean the ducts, that is, any good mold remediator, any good consultant is going to tell you to do those things. But it's not the full picture. The missing piece of getting a sick home back into an environment where your body can heal involves cleaning and detoxing the home. So mycotoxins stick around after mold. They stick around after mold remediation. And in some cases, mold remediation can actually cause the release of more mycotoxins. In fact, we're dealing with a case like this. And this is another good example that mold doesn't care about your socioeconomic status. This customer is a very famous professional athlete. He obviously owns a very large home, and there was a building issue that caused a leak over a couple of years. They found mold, and they called a mold remediator to come in and to remove it. But when that mold remediator opened up the wall and remediated it, he released more spores and toxins to the point that the family had to leave the home. The children are very sick, so he completely contaminated that home. And this is what can happen after mold remediation, and why the detoxing of the home is so important. So mycotoxins stick around. Mold remediation does not address the full building envelope, right? Typically, they're addressing an isolated part of the home. A good mold remediator is going to set up great containment to try and contain that problem. But before that mediator got there, what has happened to those spores and that mold, right? It's probably, you've got the whole building is contaminated, and the entire envelope needs to be detoxed. So our solution at Superstratum, this is really what we set out to solve. There are good and bad mold remediators out there. There's good and bad information out there about mold remediation. But there was nothing out there about detoxifying the home. There were no products that had been proven to destroy mycotoxins. And there were labs and people who were trying to do this. So at Superstratum Labs, we identified this as the thing that we really needed to develop a solution for. And what we realized is that so many of the solutions are professional solutions, and that's appropriate, but people need solutions now. People need solutions affordably. And in many cases, people want to do it themselves for these reasons. So we knew it was important to develop cleaners that were effective, that were safe, and that we could put directly into the hands of people who needed them. So that's what we do. We develop cutting edge cleaning and detox solutions for the home. We do this for homeowners and we do it for professionals. So we will talk a little bit about this, how you can use our products. We have a whole system that you can use and do yourself in a whole home detox or as your maintenance cleaning going forward. We also make products and work with professionals. So if you're in the middle of a professional job, if you've got a professional job coming up, then we can work with your professional, get them connected with our professional protocols and products, and they can implement our products and the home detox, what we call our whole home system, which we'll talk about, into the professional service as well. So our focus is on cleaning, restoring the sick home, but we are a company that's focused on health. Many mold remediators and many cleaning companies out there, the health side is a little bit of a liability to them, right? They don't really understand these things that cause, most mold remediators are not chemists, they're not doctors. So there's a large missing gap of information. So I'm gonna turn it over to John Miles here, and John will talk to you a little bit about our whole home system. He'll explain that, and I saw a question in here, what ingredients are in these products. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll get deep into that, and we can direct you to even more information if you want to learn more about that. But John, I'll turn it over to you. Why don't you explain to everybody what our whole home system is and what we offer?
Sure. Our system's broken down into 3 distinctive phases. The first phase that we do is the cleaning phase with our building cleaner. The building cleaner that is manufactured for us is a very unique, not just like any HOCl chemistry out there. Ours is an HE-HOCl. What that means is it's been specifically designed to oxidize mycotoxins that are left in these environments. A mycotoxin is an organic compound. I think a lot of people know what VOCs are, volatile organic compounds. These particular organic compounds are not volatile at room temperature, but they're the same as just like any other volatile organic compound. And so they have oxidation on them. HE-HOCl attacks these particular double bonds, if you remember your chemistry back in high school, and it starts an oxidation process, just like the sun oxidizes the old newspaper that left out in the yard or any type of a swing set or paint, the dog house that was left. It all tends to fade. Same process is going on. This particular building cleaner will attack those unsaturations. So what we first do is to fog these environments. Application rate is 1 gallon per 5,000 cubic feet. And now you out there, that what is a cubic foot? That's the square foot times the height of the room. So that's that box of volume. So 1 gallon does that. So we'll fog this environment, let that dry, takes about 30 minutes to dry, and you work through the area that you're focused on. After you've completed that fog, you go into a deep micro clean, okay, a forensic clean, okay, with the building cleaner. You'll put it in a 32-ounce bottle. You'll spray with disposable wipes, paper towels, and clean all the little contents that are in the home that are there as well. So you're focused, like I say, first the fog, the ceilings, the walls with that, let that dry, then all the little contents, as well as the flat surfaces that could be your tables, window seals, and door molding, all the places where dust kind of hibernates, and we all know where that is. That's where we're focusing because mycotoxins love to stick to dust particles. Okay. They also will be in the summer months more out into the water phase or in the air because they are also hydrophilic. So when humidity rises, these things become airborne. But we're focused in all these areas. So that's the first phase with our HE-HOCl, fogging, and the microclean. Then we'll do a second fog in this process, mainly to raise the humidity in these environments, trying to keep them around 65% or higher. And that's to initiate the delivery system of our deodor bombs. This is a chlorine dioxide delivery system. This is focused just with these little packets with the gas. Now, the reason that we do this particular type of first, the liquids can get to only where liquids can get. And so gases typically will penetrate areas where we can't get to. So that's the main reason we'll also use this chemistry. This chemistry as well is an oxidizer, so it will break down these particular compounds, as well as other VOCs or odors that you may have in this environment too. So we set off the chlorine dioxide in the home. We'll air out the home. Let me go back a little bit. When we do this chlorine dioxide system, it is over a 12-hour period. We typically will initiate this application around later in the day, 5 o'clock, 5 p.m., and let that go till 8 o'clock the next morning. People, pets, and plants do need to be out of the environment when you do set these off. You'll come back in, air out the environment, turn the AC back on. You'll have the fan running through the process, and our whole procedures are in our whole home system guide and protocol. And then you'll air out that home. It may take 4 hours, it may take less. It really depends on your environment. So once we've aired out, we come back with a small little clean, and then we go into the last phase, which is our protection phase. That's with our endurance coating. That product there, you put in the high moisture areas, around your window seals, around your HVAC system, the registers that come out, all those high condensation behind your washer and dryer, your refrigerators, and then on the ceiling of your bathrooms, even in the showers themselves. And this will keep those mold spores when they land on this surface, they will not grow on those surfaces. Now, this can also be used in attics and crawl spaces. And, you'll get even longer term protection with this product down there because there's not any abrasion or going on. So this product can last 10 to 20 years in those environments, protecting for any particular inoculation that'll come, which is natural, that those surfaces are protected so the mold growth wouldn't happen because you're not normally up there checking or downstairs checking in the crawl space as well. So that's what our endurance coating does, that long-term protection.
I want to make sure we have enough time. I always like to leave enough time for questions. Whatever else I was going to cover, I'm sure we'll cover in the questions. So let's do that now. Or actually, one more thing I want to say too. We also have the opportunity to set up a call with a home detox expert. So you can speak with John, you can speak with Elizabeth. We have as many tools as possible to help you do it yourself. But if you have a solution and you need help, if you're working with a professional, our team is always available, and we'd be happy to talk with you guys. Okay, so let's get through some of these questions. We talked a little bit about it, but we'll talk a little bit more about the ingredients of the solution. So let me go back to this. In fact, why don't I move over to our website so we can we'll look more at the products here. We'll just go straight to the shop. So our cleaners, this is the building cleaner that we were talking about. This is the phase 1 of the whole home system. All of these cleaners are made with HE-HOCl. Now, HOCl is hypochlorous acid. This is a chemical that's generated inside of your body. Your immune system creates it to destroy pathogens and bacteria and things that get into your body. It is not a stable compound, which is why it hasn't been popular in disinfectants and cleaners and these things, because it's difficult to generate. Our technology, and specifically the manufacturing process of its technology, creates hypochlorous acid. But unlike other hypochlorous acids that are on the market currently, this hypochlorous acid is what they call hypotonic electrolytic hypochlorous acid. And all that means is that it's made with electricity and it has a very low salt content, which is important and what makes this so aggressive and effective at destroying a mycotoxin. So this HE-HOCl, it's pH neutral, it's extremely safe. This chemical is used in cosmetic face sprays. It's used in vegetable wash. This is an incredible chemical to use in so many different ways. This is a 500 plus part per million solution, so it's very high concentrated. It's still very safe at that concentration, but it's very, very powerful. Our everyday cleaner is a 300 part per million version of that. But to give you an idea, the hypochlorous acid, it's like if you were to buy a pre-makeup spray at a cosmetics place with hypochlorous acid, that's going to be anywhere from 80 to 140 parts per million. So these chemicals are super effective hypochlorous acids, and that they're at very high concentrations so that it delivers the right oxidation power that we need.
And they all break down to salt when after they run through their mechanism. Water evaporates and you're left with a residue of salt. You typically won't see this on your surfaces. If you do use a lot in the fogging process, you may see it pool together and it easily cleans up. But no one's allergic to salt, so there's nothing to worry about these chemistries, unlike a lot of other chemistries out there that leave chemical residues that are more harmful than the products you're actually trying to clean up.
Yep. And John, will you comment real quickly here on the deodor bombs safe around electronics, laptops?
Yes, I mean it is an oxidizer, and so that it's kind of a little bit. I know people get worried with that. For one application of this is not going to hurt any of your equipment with the chlorine dioxide, and so if you are afraid and you want, you can wrap those things up with a plastic bag or cover them. But for one application for the running for those 12 hours, you're going to be completely fine and not having any type of issues with that.
Yeah. And cautions on using those in rental apartments. Like John said, the gas does, it's over a 12-hour period. You have to be out of the home. Chlorine dioxide breaks down to a salt, but when it's in its gas form, it's toxic. So obviously you can't breathe that in. You have to wear an N95 or a P100 face mask when you set those off. But once it's done its job and broken down, you're not left with any toxic chemicals. But that does mean if you're in an apartment, you would have to, depending on how that apartment is, if you've got an open breezeway, then that's something that you could do because you're not going to have any shared shared airflow there. But if you're in an indoor apartment, then you would really want to work with maintenance or just make sure that there's nothing where that gas is going to leak out. So yeah, we would definitely encourage you to work with your building if you're in an apartment. Got a question here. Is there any way to remove AC system? We have mold and it's 30,000 to replace the system. We've had an ERMI done. What do you think about ERMI testing for the house? I've been using your products. Thank you. I have a 10-year-old with OCD and tics. I'm sorry to hear that. So I guess in terms of removing the system, John, I'll let you talk a little bit about that. But actually, I'll give that to you. Why don't you talk about the HVAC and then specifically ERMI and some of the testing?
Well, the ERMI testing is typically focused on what's Seth said earlier around the mold itself, the mold spores. Now, ERMI will is really, you can't tell the difference between a dead spore and a live spore. So just that's one thing just to let people understand a little bit there. If you do have high numbers of that, it typically means you do have some active mold there. So we do need to, you need to get rid of that. And that's where an environmentalist and a specialist needs to come in and to evaluate that area. Now, if you've already done that and you know exactly where this particular issue is, then professional remediators can work to get those out. Now, when you're specifically talking about an HVAC system, it does become a little bit harder. You do need a specialist when it comes to HVACs to do that properly and not to mess up the system. But once the dust and the heavy soil areas are out of that system, then you can run a detox protocol that we have, which is basically cleaning the registers, cleaning around the major returns with the building cleaner. You can fog into this system a little bit, but then also setting a gas bomb off in the major returns and allowing that gas to be pulled through the system to detox any particular organic compounds left behind in that environment. That typically we've had very, very good success with this protocol. And as a DIYer, you're going to have that success as well.
And depending on who the HVAC cleaning company is, if they have equipment that can spray into the duct system, then you can use the building cleaner to sanitize and to clean, and also the Endurance Coating Pro. It's a great solution inside the ductwork. The technician can spray this directly onto the coils, and it forms an invisible mold resistant coating. It'll last for many years, even if that system gets wet. So this is that, insurance policy going forward. It's very cost effective and it's an easy thing to do. Okay, Lisa says mold attorney recommends one more mold test to prove that mold is still in the apartment after partial mold remediation. So how can I practically move my stuff out and not be sick and new rental while leaving some moldy air for a positive test? So if I understand correctly, you've got mold in your home right now, or in the apartment now after a bad remediation. You're moving into a new place and you want to both be able to validate with your attorney that that mold is there and get out and get your things safe. Typically in this situation, what our customers will do, depending on where they're moving and what the situation is, they'll take their contents that they want to move and they'll move them into an isolated room. So that could be the garage, that could be one room in the new environment. And we do what's called our contents cleaning protocol. So it uses these chemistries. It involves some HEPA vacuuming and cleaning with the building cleaner, and then the gassing with the balm. But you can do that in a much more enclosed space. So this would be for things like furniture, your clothes, those soft goods and fabrics and things. And that way, if you do it outside of the apartment, and you would obviously leave that environment in a state where if there's mold there, you would be able to find that. Do the gases trigger the smoke alarm, John?
Not normally, but we do recommend in our protocol you can put a little bit of blue painter's tape on the little vent of your smoke detector, and that'll eliminate that. It's typically, I've not seen it activated at all. I've actually seen it more on fogging the unit when you actually get it wet because of the fog, but not so much in the gassing to ever set off the alarm.
And Marina says, can we download the seminar? Yes, it will be up on our YouTube and we'll send this link out so you guys will have access to that. How does a company properly clean the ducts, or what to ask when hiring someone to do it? This could probably be its own seminar. We typically recommend positive pressure cleaning. Now, I'm going to make a caveat here. Most companies do negative pressure, which means they're pulling the air out of the system through the return to the truck so that they're not pushing contaminants into the home. And that concept is right? You don't want to contaminate the home by moving, dirty air. However, putting the system under negative pressure sometimes can create stress and tension on the ducts. There is now equipment that can use positive pressure where they cap the so that's one thing. If you do have access to positive pressure, it's a little bit better, to use that. But I would say typically find someone with great reviews, find someone who these $400 duct cleaners who come out and they plop, those are not the guys that you want to hire. It is true, like in many things, you are getting what you pay for in many ways. So I would look for a good company that's got good reviews and that really understands, when they're saying the right words, right? When they're not making you feel small if you bring up mold, or if you ask them about mycotoxins, or if you mention our products to them, right? And they shrug them off. You want to find a company that really cares. Okay, if we live in a mold mycotoxin environment, do you recommend getting rid of our furniture, mattress and couches? You can. You don't have to get rid of your furniture. Now, that's very common these days. People say, get rid of everything. That may have been a good advice in the past when good solutions didn't exist, but we help customers every day to reclaim their belongings. So certain things like cardboard boxes, cardboard, you want to get rid of that stuff. Books sometimes can be problematic because of all the paper, but books you can still clean. But things like furniture, your clothing, all that. Our contents cleaning protocol goes over exactly what to do on that. You can knock it out in an afternoon if you get after it. A mattress can kind of go either way. It really depends on how sensitive you are, how old the mattress is, how, a lot, if you can afford a new mattress, it's always good to just kind of get a new mattress. But we actually had somebody this morning, right, who was doing the exact same thing. So you can, clean a mattress, but mattresses can be more difficult. Okay, if I can visibly see mold, is it still important to do an ERMI test? The mold has been around for a long time and apparently didn't bother the previous people. It's glaringly obvious. That's a great question. My philosophy on testing is this. Testing is data, and data can be helpful, but data can also be expensive to generate. testing can be expensive. And when you're sick in your home, what you really want is a solution. Now, for some people, they are not sure if it's their home, right? So they said, well, let me test. Let me find what's in the home. Let me do some testing in my body. I need to confirm that my home is causing it. But in my opinion, there's a much simpler way to figure out if your home's making you sick. Go on vacation. Leave the home for a few days. And if your symptoms get better, if your mood improves, all of that, then it means the home's making you sick. At that point, you know you need a solution. So what I encourage people to do is I say, take that money that you're going to spend on testing, on that expensive environmentalist who's going to tell you, what species the mold is, and start moving towards a solution. Now, that solution might involve a professional environmentalist and professional remediation because it may be a big issue, but let them do that, right? Because the testing that they do, they're doing for specific reasons to figure out how to remove the mold, where the mold is. For most people, all they want to know is my home making me sick? So we actually have a mold and mycotoxin detection kit that will be relaunching in a couple of weeks. And this is not just a mold test, but it also has a mycotoxin test. So you can swab your home for dust and we'll tell you both what mold's there and what mycotoxins are there. Now, the reason we created this is to do that exact thing, to just give people an affordable way to get that validation. Is my home making me sick? Is it not? But I typically tell people not to get too tied up in all of the different testing and what data is good and what's not and spending that money. If you know your home's making you sick, then move towards the solution. Difference between the Deodor Bomb and Deodor Bomb Pros. The Deodor Bomb Pro it releases twice as much gas. So that product, the Deodor Bomb Pro, is meant to be used in non-living spaces. So that would be your crawl space, basements, you can use it in an attic, garage. It's great for like storage sheds, things like that, where you really want a lot of power. But because
Also
it's
in the
very, very
negative
potent.
containment area.
What's that, John?
Also in the negative containment area that you have mold
Yep.
remediation being done.
Yep. The professionals will use it there. But that gas, we don't use it inside because when it's at high concentration, it can take the color out of certain things. So it's meant to be used in non-living spaces. If you have your own ULV fogger, yes, you can use it. Can you use Superstratum in your washing machine to clean clothes? Yes, you can. We have a laundry product in development, but right now you can take about 3/4, John, 3 or 4 ounces.
3 ounces of the building cleaner for normal. If you are focusing on mycotoxin clean, about 4 ounces of the building cleaner in the bleach tray in your washing machine. Just pour that solution in there. That typically dispenses at the last phase of your wash in the rinse cycle, and that will neutralize any leftover mycotoxins that could possibly be stuck to your clothes at that time.
And Danielle's asking, if we're performing mold remediation under negative air before transitioning to your protocol, how much time do you suggest we wait after the remediation before moving into the positive pressure cleaning phase using your protocol? So to be more clear, the positive pressure that I was speaking of, that's just the HVAC cleaning. Negative pressure, that's correct for mold remediation, but you can roll right into it. That whole setup can stay there. In fact, it's best for that to stay. If the cavities are open, you want to leave the cavities open because you want that gas to get there. You want to be able to coat those places. So you can do it directly after the mold remediation. You can do it yourself directly after, or the mold remediator can do it, in his process as well after he's done the remediation. So if I can't afford a remediation at this point, these products will help me until I can. Yes, that's exactly right. We have designed these products so that you can use them. We say that they're Band-Aids, and a lot of people say, well, we don't want to use a Band-Aid. Well, we use Band-Aids every day, right? Sometimes you got to go to the hospital. Sometimes you need a splint or stitches or whatever it is, but sometimes you need a Band-Aid, and sometimes you need a Band-Aid to stop the bleeding till you can get to the hospital. So that you can use our product for that. And our team is there to help as well. Bomb Pro, what about in the basement when living above? You have to be out of the home when you use the bombs. So if you're setting them off in the basement, then you would need to be out of the home for 12 hours, and then you would need to let that home air out. In the dishwasher detergent sufficient for dishes, or need to wipe down with everyday cleaner. If those are exposed, then you would wipe them down with everyday cleaner. And or our everyday wipes as well, which we just have too. But yeah, you would want to wipe those down.
Yeah, and make sure you clean the seal, and that's where the wipes, you're going to have a pair of gloves on. and open the wipes and clean that seal around there. I don't know if how many people do this, but there's a lot of different bacteria and germs and mold as well on those, and that will help keep your dishwasher from being smelling fresh. Because we all know if you haven't done that in a while, you open it up, and even though it may be clean, the dish is in there, you still smell that musty odor. So it's always important to do that at least once a month.
Excellent. All right. Well, we're coming up on an hour here. Are there any more questions? Oh, okay. Yep. I see one more. Thanks for the previous. Can they be used in 6 mil containment chambers? Yes. The Deodorant Pros can be put into the remediation containment chambers. All right. Well, great. Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for being here. We love doing this and we're happy to help. If you have more questions, if you want to talk to us one-on-one, reach out to us. You can do that through the website. We will follow all this up. We'll send you a link to this seminar. We'll send you the discount code and we'll give you a little bit more information so that you guys can take the next steps. So thank you for joining us. And we're here to help. Find us anytime and good luck on the journey.